At exactly 4:47 in the morning on March 14th, 1944, Anzio Beachhead, Italy, Corporal Marcus Romano lay in a shell crater 40 yards from German lines watching five spotters through a scope he had modified against direct orders. The spotters sat in a ruined farmhouse window, coordinates rolling off their lips into field radios, directing 88 millimeter fire that had killed 11 Americans in the past 6 hours. Standard doctrine said take them one at a time. One shot, one spotter, four chances for the others to scatter and call in your position before you could work the bolt. Mark had a different idea, an illegal idea, one that could put him in front of a firing squad if it failed. In the next 90 seconds, he would break three regulations, violate the manual of arms, and fire a weapon that should not exist. The German spotters would die before they understood what hit them, and the United States Army would spend 6 months trying to decide whether to hang him or promote him. But understanding how a dockworker's son from Red Hook created a semi-automatic rifle in a supply tent at 2:30 in the morning requires going back. Back to the Gowanus Canal that smelled like diesel and dead fish. Back to his uncle's garage where 14-year-old Hans learned that small changes made big differences. Back to the promise he made to a dying friend who had saved his life and asked him to save others. Marcus Romano grew up where the Gowanus Canal met the Atlantic shipping lanes, and every man over 16 worked with his hands or did not eat. Red Hook, Brooklyn in the 1930s was a world built on cargo and sweat and wages that fed families if nobody got sick. His father unloaded merchant vessels, 12-hour shifts in summer heat that could cook you from inside out, winter cold that froze hands around cargo hooks, work that destroyed men slowly, ground them down one crate at a time, but it paid enough to keep four kids fed if you were careful with money. Uncle Sal repaired ship engines in a garage 2 blocks from the water, massive diesel engines that powered freighters across the Atlantic, carburetors so finicky that being off by a fraction made the difference between smooth running and catastrophic failure. Timing systems where milliseconds mattered more than most people understood. Mark started hanging around at 14. Not because he was gifted, because Uncle Sal paid 25 cents to clean tools, and he liked having money his father did not control. Money that was his, that he could spend on egg creams or save in a coffee can under his bed. But he learned, watched Uncle Sal diagnose problems by sound alone. The particular knock that meant a worn bearing. The whistle indicating a cracked manifold. The rhythm of combustion when everything worked versus when something was wrong in ways owners could not explain. But Uncle Sal heard instantly. Uncle Sal taught him engines were not mysterious. They were systems. Pressure and timing and combustion happening in predictable sequences. If you understood the system, you could fix it. And if you understood how to improve it, you could make it better than engineers who designed it ever intended. Summer 1940. Mark was 16. A 1936 Ford came in running rough. Owner said it stalled constantly. Two mechanics had declared it unfixable. Uncle Sal told Mark to try. Mark spent 3 days on it, cleaned the carburetor, adjusted the float to factory specs, reset timing exactly as the manual specified, test fired it, engine still stalled, ran rough, died at idle. He tried everything the manual recommended. Nothing worked. Fourth day, Uncle Sal leaned against the workbench watching, arms folded, face showing nothing. You are following the manual. Mark looked up, frustrated. Is that not what I am supposed to do? Manual tells you what Ford engineers think should work. But this engine has been modified. See that weld knot factory. Manual does not account for modifications. You have to think about the system, how air flows, how fuel mixes, how timing affects combustion when parts are not what the manual expects. Mark stared at the engine, really looked at it. The intake manifold was welded, modified, changed airflow patterns completely. Carburetor settings that worked for factory parts would never work for this. He adjusted the carburetor to compensate for airflow that should not exist but did. Reset timing to account for different compression. Test fired it. The engine purred, smooth, perfect. Uncle Sal smiled, small, satisfied. That is thinking, kid, not following. The system does not care what the manual says. System cares what works. Remember that. Mark never forgot. But Mark had a temper. 3 fights before 16. First because someone insulted his mother. Mark put the guy down with 2 punches and did not stop until Uncle Sal pulled him off. Second because a dock supervisor accused his father of stealing cargo. False accusation, but the supervisor would not back down. Mark was there, saw his father take the insult silently because arguing meant getting fired. Mark broke the supervisor's nose. His father lost the job anyway. Third fight got him suspended. Teacher said he was too stupid for academics and should accept manual labor as his future. Mark put the teacher's desk through a window. His mother sat him down in the kitchen, hands folded, eyes hard. You have a thinking brain, Marcus, and you have angry hands. I do not know which will ruin you first, but you better figure it out before one of them gets you killed. He tried, channeled anger into work, into engines, into understanding systems that could be fixed if you thought hard enough. December 7th, 1941. Mark was working Uncle Sal's garage when news came over radio. Pearl Harbor, Japanese attack, war coming whether anyone was ready. Mark enlisted December 9th, 2 days after. Angry hands wanted to hit something. Thinking brains said the world needed fixing, and armies did that. Fort Dix, New Jersey, January 1942. Basic training. 8 weeks of men screaming about discipline and following orders. Mark hated the screaming but understood the discipline. Systems only worked if everyone knew their role. He met Bobby Sullivan on day 3. Boston kid, 20 years old like Mark. Pre-med student at Boston University before the draft. Quiet, methodical, patient in ways Mark was not. They shared a tent. Bobby was everything Mark was not. Calm when Mark was angry. Patient when Mark wanted to act. Believed in procedures because they were written by people smarter than you. Mark thought procedures were written by people who had never fixed anything broken. They argued constantly about everything, whether regulations made sense, whether officers knew what they were doing, whether the war would end quickly. But they became best friends, the kind that forms when circumstances strip away pretense and show you who someone actually is. Late night, March 1942. Firewatch duty, sitting outside barracks, smoking cigarettes bought from a corporal who stole them on from supply. Bobby spoke quietly, looking at stars that felt different here. What are you going to do after the war? Mark fleckled ash into darkness. Uncle Sal's garage. Fix engines, make money. What about you? Finish pre-med, become surgeon, fix people instead of cars. Mark laughed. Fix people, fix cars, same thing, just different parts. Bobby looked at him. Really looked. Like seeing something he had not considered. You know what, you are right. We should do it together. Do what? Open a shop. Romano and Sullivan Services. You fix machines, I fix people. Auto garage and medical clinic. Same building. Brooklyn. Mark stared. That is the dumbest idea I have ever heard. Bobby smiled. But you are thinking about it. Mark was thinking about it. Building with 2 entrances. One for cars, one for people. Both fixing things that were broken. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. They shook hands. Promise between friends. Something to survive for. Camp Croft, South Carolina. April 1942. Rifle training. Mark qualified expert marksman first try. The M1903 Springfield felt right. Bolt action, 5-round magazine, simple mechanics. He understood it like carburetors. Bobby qualified marksman, but not expert. Assigned combat medic training. Mark went to scout sniper school. Different paths, same unit. Bobby joked, you shoot people, I save them. Seems backwards for our partnership. Mark did not laugh. War is backwards. We survive it and build that shop. North Africa, August 1942. Same unit, different roles. Mark hunted, Bobby healed. They wrote letters about the garage and clinic, drew plans on cigarette packs, calculated costs. Sicily, July 1943. Mainland Italy, September. Always together. Always counting days until they could go home. January 1944. They arrived at Anzio together. 32,000 troops trapped in a beachhead 6 miles deep, 16 miles wide. German artillery on high ground. Shells falling constantly. Hell with a beach view. Bobby set up aid station in a destroyed farmhouse. Mark took sniper positions in craters and ruins. Both surviving. Both dreaming about Brooklyn. About Romano and Sullivan services. About fixing things in a world that desperately needed it. The real killers at Anzio were not German infantry. They were the forward observers. Spotters hidden in farmhouses and church steeples. Watching Allied movements through binoculars. Calling coordinates to 88mm batteries 3 miles away. American snipers could take out one spotter. Maybe two if exceptionally fast. But Germans positioned them in groups. 3 to 5 per location. Betting American doctrine of one shot, one target would give others time to scatter. The bet paid off. Casualty rate at Anzio was 38%. Artillery caused most of it. The Springfield 1903 was bolt action. Between shots, even highly trained snipers needed 3 to 4 seconds. Pull bolt back to eject spent casing. Push forward to chamber new round. Reacquire target through scope. Steady breathing. Fire again. 4 seconds was enough for a German spotter to shout warning. Grab radio and maps. Disappear through doorway or behind cover. 4 seconds meant you killed one spotter and 4 others escaped to reposition and call artillery that would kill 10 Americans before sunset. Mark watched it happen dozens of times. Perfect shot. Drop spotter cleanly. Work bolt fast as humanly possible. By the time he reacquired through scope, the window was empty. 30 minutes later, same spotters would appear elsewhere and shells would start falling again. The mathematics were brutal. 5 spotters working together could observe and call coordinates faster than any single sniper could eliminate them. February 1944 brought deaths that hit close. Private Tommy Ritchie from Philadelphia, 21, blown apart by 88mm while carrying ammunition. Mark had shared rations with him 2 days before. Tommy talked about his girlfriend and the ring he was saving for. Sergeant Bill Hooper from Kansas, 24, killed by shrapnel digging a foxhole, had loaned Mark dry socks when his feet were rotting. Good man, dead because a spotter saw him. Corporal Eddie Garrett from Tennessee, 23, obliterated when shell landed on his position. Eddie had taught Mark a card game from Memphis. Had a laugh that made you smile even when everything was terrible. All 3 died because German spotters called in their exact locations. All 3 would be alive if American snipers could kill spotters faster. February 20th, 1944, dawn. Mark in sniper position, watching farmhouse, known to house German observers. Random 88mm barrage started. Harassment fire, Germans shooting at likely positions hoping to hit something valuable. Shell landed 15 yards from Mark's crater. Close enough he felt concussion in his chest. Shrapnel tore through air. Some tore through Mark's left arm, artery severed. Blood pulsing hot and dark. Too much blood. Mark tried applying pressure with right hand but could not reach properly. Tried crawling back toward American lines, but blood loss made him weak. World graying at edges. Bobby appeared from nowhere, running low across open ground from aid station 200 yards away, sliding into crater with medical kit already open. Bobby's hands moved with practiced precision. Tourniquet above wound, tight enough to stop arterial flow. Pressure on wound itself. Field dressing wrapped and tied while shells continued landing. Mark's vision fading. Bobby, I cannot feel my hand. Bobby's voice was calm, professional. The voice he used when things were bad, but patients needed to stay calm. You are not dying today. I did not survive 8 months with you to watch you bleed out in a crater. Stay with me, Mark. Stay with me. Bobby operated actual field surgery, clamped severed artery, sutured it closed with hands that did not shake despite shells landing close enough to spray dirt over both of them. Took 12 minutes. Saved the arm. Saved Mark's life. After waiting for stretcher bearers, Bobby looked at Mark with tired but satisfied eyes. You owe me your life now. Mark could barely speak. Blood loss and shock, making everything distant. I know. So do not waste it. When we get home, we have work to do. Romano and Sullivan services. You fix machines, I fix people. That is the deal, and you do not get to back out now. Mark smiled despite everything. Deal. Bobby's expression softened. Good, because I am not letting you out of it. We are going to build something good, something that helps people, something that matters more than this war. 2 weeks later, Mark was back on duty, arm healing, debt to Bobby weighing on him in ways he could not articulate. Bobby had saved his life, had risked his own running across open ground under artillery to do it, created an obligation deeper than friendship. March 5th, 1944. Mark requested meeting with Lieutenant William Cross, platoon leader, West Point class of 1940, 24 but carrying himself much older, by the book officer who believed regulations existed for good reasons. Mark stood at attention. Sir, I have a solution for the spotter problem. Cross looked up from maps. I am listening, Corporal. The Springfield is not designed for rapid fire, but what if we modified the gas system, drill a port in the barrel, redirect gas pressure to work the bolt automatically, turn it semi-automatic, 5 rounds in 2 seconds instead of 20. Cross stared like he had suggested something obscene. You want to modify government rifles? Yes, sir, to save lives. The Springfield is bolt action by design, Corporal. It is not an M1 Garand. You cannot just drill holes in the barrel and expect it to function safely. Sir, I have been modifying engines since 14, same principles. Pressure timing, mechanical systems. I can make it work. Cross's voice went cold, sharp, tone of an officer not accustomed to being questioned by enlisted men. The field manual is very clear. Modifications to weapons require Ordnance Department approval, engineering review, safety testing by qualified personnel. You are proposing to destroy government property and risk lives of soldiers using unsafe equipment. But sir, if it works, we could. If it works, you will have violated regulations. If it fails, you will have killed American soldiers. The answer is no. Follow doctrine, Corporal. Engage one target, then displace. That is how scout snipers operate. Sir, by the time I displace, the other spotters are gone. They reposition and we get shelled again. Then you need to be faster at acquiring targets. The rifle is not designed to be faster, sir. That is the problem. Cross stood, meeting over, voice final. The Springfield is designed exactly as it should be. Accurate, reliable, proven. If you cannot use it effectively within doctrinal parameters, that is a training issue, not equipment issue. Dismissed. Mark left, angry, frustrated, but not surprised. He had known what the answer would be. Permission denied. Doctrine was sacred. Manual was gospel. Soldiers would continue dying while officers defended regulations. March 6th through 8th brought 3 more deaths from artillery called in by spotters. Mark could not kill quickly enough. He followed doctrine, took 1 shot per position. Displaced. Other spotters escaped every time. Men kept dying. Mathematics kept being brutal. System kept working exactly as designed. March 9th, 1944. 3:47 in the afternoon. German 88 mm artillery barrage targeted forward aid station. Direct hit. Building collapsed. 14 wounded men inside. 2 medics. Mark was 200 yards away. Heard explosion. Saw smoke and dust rising. Ran without thinking. Dug through rubble with hands that bled from broken wood and shattered brick. Found Bobby crushed under collapsed wall. Legs trapped under debris too heavy for one man to lift. Blood coming from mouth. Still conscious, but breathing wrong. Bobby's eyes found Mark. Focused despite pain. Mark cannot feel my legs. Mark screamed for help. For soldiers to come lift the wall. Started trying to move debris himself, knowing it was too heavy but unable to stop. Bobby coughed. More blood. Darker. The spotters called this in. You said 4 seconds. You were right. I know, Bobby. I tried. Cross said no. Doctrine says. Bobby grabbed Mark's arm. Grip surprisingly strong for someone dying. Forget doctrine, forget Cross, forget the manual. You know how to fix it. Gas port, piston. Make it work. Bobby, I cannot. It is illegal. Court-martial. I could. Bobby's voice got weaker but more intense. Every word an effort. I saved your life, February 20th. You owe me. Bobby, please, promise me. No more waiting for permission, no more following orders. that get men killed. Fix it. Save them. Mark was crying, did not care who saw. I promise, on your life I promise. Bobby smiled through blood. Not my life, theirs. 340. Save 340. Romano and Sullivan Services. In my name. Eyes losing focus, breathing shallow and wrong. Tell my dad I tried to fix people, like he fixes fires. Last breath at 3:51, 4 minutes 14 seconds after shell hit. Mark sat holding Bobby's body while other soldiers moved around him, while war continued, while nothing and everything changed. Finally, Mark stood, looked toward farmhouse where German spotters had called coordinates that killed Bobby. Still there, still working, still killing. Something inside crystallized, hard, unforgiving, absolutely certain. Bobby had saved his life. Bobby died because Mark had been too scared to break regulations. Never again. Never again would he wait for permission while friends died. That night, Mark sat in foxhole with Springfield across lap, thinking about timing, about gas pressure, about the promise made to a dying friend, about Romano and Sullivan Services that would never exist now, but could exist in memory if Mark kept his word. He had 6 hours before he would break every regulation the Army ever wrote. 6 hours before he would risk everything to honor a promise. 6 hours before 2:30 in the morning, when a Brooklyn mechanic would start building the weapon that would save 340 American lives and almost get him executed for it. Bobby died telling him to fix it. Mark had the tools and knowledge and debt he could never repay. All he needed was courage to do what Bobby asked with his dying breath. The work mattered more than rules. Lives mattered more than regulations. Bobby understood that. Now Mark understood too. In 6 hours, everything would change. March 11th, 1944. 2:30 in the morning, Mark Romano waited until the camp slept. The deep, exhausted sleep of men who had been shelled for 7 weeks straight. The kind of sleep where artillery rumbling 3 miles away became white noise you stopped hearing. He grabbed what he needed, coil of wire from the communications dump, hand drill borrowed from engineers who would not miss it until morning. Scrap metal from a destroyed German half-track someone had dragged inside the perimeter weeks ago. And his Springfield, the rifle that was about to become something it was never designed to be. The supply tent smelled like canvas and gun oil and the particular mustiness of fabric that never quite dried in Italian winter. He set up by flashlight, disassembled the Springfield on a wooden crate, every piece laid out like an engine Uncle Sal would rebuild in the Brooklyn garage that felt 1,000 miles and a lifetime away. The rifle separated into components: barrel, bolt assembly, trigger group, stock. Every part simple and functional and proven across decades of warfare. Mark looked at them and saw what Uncle Sal had taught him to see. A system, pressure and timing and mechanical movement that could be modified if you understood how the parts worked together. He thought of Bobby. Every step of this build was Bobby's promise. Bobby's death. Bobby's voice saying, "Fix it, save them 340. The gas port had to be drilled exactly 6 inches from the chamber. Location mattered more than most people would understand. Too close to the chamber, and gas pressure would be too high. Barrel could crack or explode. Too far, and pressure would be too low. System would not cycle. The rifle would fire once and jam. He marked the spot with grease pencil. Measured twice. Uncle Sal's voice in his head. Measure twice, drill once. Mistakes in metal are permanent. The hand drill bit into forged steel with a screech that sounded too loud in the quiet tent. Mark worked slowly, checking depth every 30 seconds. Too shallow and gas would not vent properly. Too deep and the barrel would weaken. Structural integrity compromised. The rifle could fail catastrophically in his hands during the moment he needed it most. 15 minutes of careful drilling. The bit punched through, clean 1/8 inch hole. He blew out metal shavings, wiped the barrel with an oil rag, held it up to the flashlight. Perfect, Bobby's voice echoing in memory. You know how to fix it. Yeah, Bobby, I know. The piston had to be fabricated from scrap. He had no machine shop, no lathe, just a file and determination and skills learned in a Brooklyn garage where you made do with what you had because buying new parts meant not eating. He cut a piece of steel rod from the German half-track wreckage, filed it down by hand, The piston had to slide inside a tube he would fashion from salvaged wire, smoothly enough to move freely, tight enough to seal and capture gas pressure. Test fit. Too loose, file more, test again. Still loose, file carefully. Test. Better. Test again. 20 iterations, fingers cramping from the repetitive motion, cold seeping through the canvas tent walls. None of it mattered. Bobby would have loved this precision. Engineering work, the kind he wanted to do after finishing medical school. Precision that kept people alive instead of letting them die because systems were badly designed. Except Bobby did not get to do that work. Bobby died because Mark had hesitated, had waited for permission, had followed regulations that valued procedure over results. Final test fit, the piston slid smooth. Sealed tight, perfect. The gas tube had to run from the drilled port back toward the receiver. He fashioned it from communications wire, bent and shaped it, positioned it to catch escaping gas and direct pressure to push the piston. The angle mattered. Everything mattered. 1 degree wrong and the system would not work. He wrapped wire around the barrel. Tight. Secure. Had to hold under sustained fire and recoil. Could not shift or loosen, or the whole modification would fail when he needed it most. Connected the piston to the bolt with thin steel rod he bent with pliers and filed to fit. The connection transferred gas pressure from piston to bolt. Pushed the bolt back automatically. Eject spent casing. Chamber new round. All without Mark touching anything. His thumb caught on sharp metal. Blood welling. He wrapped it with cloth torn from his undershirt. Kept working. Bobby would have stitched this in 30 seconds. 6 perfect sutures, neat and professional, and done. But Bobby was dead because regulations mattered more than keeping men alive. The trigger modification was the dangerous part. The part that could kill him if he got it wrong. Trigger had to release automatically when the bolt closed. Otherwise, the rifle would fire once cycled the bolt chamber around and stop. Semi-automatic in name only, he filed down the sear. Tiny adjustments, tested by hand, hammer snapped forward, too much spring tension, adjusted, tested again, better, tested 40 times over 40 minutes. Each test bringing him closer to the balance point where the mechanism would work reliably without misfiring. Every micro adjustment was Bobby's voice. Fix it, Mark, save them. 340. You promised. I promised, Bobby, I am keeping it. 4:15 in the morning. The rifle was reassembled, looked almost normal. Gas tube camouflaged with mud and cloth wrapping. Internal modifications invisible unless you disassembled the action and knew what you were looking for. Mark walked behind the supply tent, away from sleeping soldiers who would ask questions he could not answer. Loaded 5 rounds into the magazine, aimed at a dirt mound 40 yards away. This either worked or he had just destroyed a piece of government property and built something that would blow up in his face. Either way, there was no going back now. Bobby had asked him to do this. Bobby had saved his life and died asking Mark to save others. He pulled the trigger. The rifle fired, recoil familiar and solid, then the sound he had been hoping to hear. The mechanical clack of the bolt cycling automatically. Gas pressure pushing the piston. Piston pushing the bolt. Bolt ejecting spent casing and chambering fresh round. The trigger released. The rifle fired again without Mark touching anything. Boom, clack, boom, clack, boom, clack, boom. 5 rounds in 2 seconds. Barrel hot against his hand, ears ringing from the rapid fire. Smoke curling from the muzzle in the pre-dawn darkness. Mark stood there. The weapon that should not exist had just proved Uncle Sal right. The system does not care what the manual says. The system cares what works. He whispered to the smoke, in the darkness, in the memory of a friend who would never see Brooklyn again. Bobby, I kept the promise. March 14th, 1944, 4:15 in the morning, on intelligence report from the previous night. 5 German spotters in a farmhouse 600 yards beyond the wire. They had called in 3 artillery strikes overnight. 6 Americans dead, 11 wounded. Mark volunteered for the patrol. Lieutenant Cross approved without looking up from his maps. 1 target Romano, then displace. Yes, sir. Mark crawled through the wire at 4:15, mud soaking his uniform, cold and wet, moving slowly with the rifle cradled in his arms. The modified rifle that could get him court-martialed if anyone discovered what he had done to it. The farmhouse sat on a low rise, second-story windows facing American lines. Perfect observation position. Spotters would have clear view of everything happening in the beachhead. He found a shell crater 40 yards out, settled into it. The crater stank of cordite and rotting earth and death that had happened here days or weeks ago and left its mark in the soil. Through the scope, he could see them. 5 German spotters, field gray uniforms, hunched over radios and map tables positioned by the window. One held binoculars, scanning the American lines methodically. Professional, experienced. Another spoke into a radio handset, mouth moving, coordinates being relayed. Artillery that would fall somewhere in the beachhead in the next 30 minutes. Americans who would die because these 5 men were doing their jobs and nobody could stop them fast enough. Standard doctrine said take the one with binoculars first. He was the primary observer. Work the bolt. 4 seconds, other 4 would scatter. Position compromised. Maybe 1 kill if Mark was lucky. But Mark's rifle was not standard anymore. His heart hammered in his chest. 5 targets. If the modification worked, he could take all 5 before they understood what was happening. If it failed, he would be exposed with a jammed rifle and 5 German soldiers who knew exactly where he was. Bobby's voice in his memory. Fix it. Save them. Mark adjusted his breathing, slowed his heartbeat the way Uncle Sal had taught him to steady his hands before delicate carburetor work, when precision mattered more than speed. The crosshairs settled on the first spotter's chest. 600 yards, no wind, clear morning air. Perfect conditions. 4:47 a.m. exactly. He pulled the trigger. The rifle fired. First spotter jerked backward like someone had yanked a rope tied to his chest. Binoculars fell from his hands, clattered on the floor. The gas system cycled. That mechanical clack Mark had heard during testing. The sound of something working exactly as designed. The rifle fired automatically. Second spotter's head snapped back. He dropped without making a sound, dead before his brain registered the first shot. Third shot. Spotter collapsed across the map table. Radio handset slipped from his grip, fell to the floor with a crash nobody would hear over the sound that was just now reaching them from 600 yards away. Fourth shot. Spotter spun and fell, trying to understand what was happening. Failing, dying. Fifth shot. The one who had been calling coordinates. The one whose voice had been sending death to American positions. He dropped. Coordinates that would never arrive. Artillery that would not kill anyone tonight. Total time elapsed. 2 seconds. 5 German spotters dead before the sound of the first shot reached them. No time to shout warning. No time to grab weapons. No time to run or hide or understand that something impossible was happening. Mark cycled the bolt manually, ejected the 5th casing, watched it tumble through air and land in mud. The barrel was hot against his hand. Smoke drifted from the muzzle. He scanned the window through his scope. No movement. 5 bodies sprawled across floor and furniture, in positions that told the story of death, arriving faster than human reaction time could process. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. No reaction from inside the farmhouse. No German soldiers rushing to investigate. No return fire. Mark crawled backward out of the crater. 50 yards. 100. Reached the wire and slipped through. Made it back to his foxhole as the sun broke over the hills to the east. For the first time in 7 weeks, the American lines at Anzio did not get shelled at dawn. Mark sat in his foxhole cleaning the rifle. Barrel still warm. He ran a patch through it. Black residue coming out on the cloth. The modification had worked. Gas system had not blown up. Rifle had cycled 5 times without jamming. He felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just dull awareness that Bobby had died for this. That 335 more lives needed saving before the promise was complete. Noon. Corporal Tony DiNardo appeared at the foxhole edge. Rifleman from the Bronx, 30 years old. Scar across his chin from a bar fight in Sicily. Eyes sharp and suspicious. He stared at Mark. You took out that spotter nest. Mark did not look up from cleaning. Yeah. All 5 spotters. Yeah. In one go. Yeah. Tony climbed down into the foxhole, looked at the rifle, then at Mark. Long, searching look. How Mark kept cleaning. Trade secret. Romano, we have been getting shelled by those spotters for 3 days. You just killed all 5 before they could scatter. How the hell did you do that? Mark set the rifle down, looked at Tony. Long moment of calculation. Tony had been in the unit since North Africa. Good soldier. Kept his mouth shut about things that needed to stay quiet. You really want to know? Yeah. It is not regulation. I do not care. Mark explained. The gas port drilled 6 inches from the chamber. The piston fabricated from half-track metal. The modified trigger group. The whole system laid out in technical detail. Tony listened without interrupting. When Mark finished, Tony was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice careful. You drilled a hole in a government rifle. Yeah. Modified the trigger mechanism. Yeah. That is destruction of military property. If Cross finds out, you are looking at court-martial. Minimum. I know. Tony picked up the rifle, examined the gas tube wrapped along the barrel, tested the bolt action, set it down carefully like it was something dangerous. Does it work every time? Worked this morning. How many rounds? 5. Magazine capacity. Tony nodded slowly. 5 rounds in 2 seconds. Jesus Christ, Romano. You built a semi-automatic out of a bolt-action Springfield. Still have to aim. Still have to hit. Still. Tony stood, looked at Mark with something like awe mixed with concern. 5 spotters in 1 sweep. That is illegal as hell. Yep. That is also brilliant. Tony left. By evening, 3 other snipers had visited Mark's position, asking quiet questions. By next morning, whispered conversations were happening across the scout platoon. Nobody told Lieutenant Cross. The knowledge spread through the underground network that exists in every military unit. The informal chain of trust connecting men who do actual fighting and understand that sometimes the manual is wrong. March 15th, 1944, 5:30 in the morning. Intelligence reported 3 German spotters in a church tower 450 yards out. They had called in an artillery strike overnight that killed 2 Americans. Mark volunteered, confident now. The rifle had worked perfectly on March 14th. 5 shots, 5 kills, 0 malfunctions. He crawled to position, shell crater 380 yards from the church, set up with the rifle wedged against the crater edge, using a rolled blanket as rest. Through the scope, he could see 3 spotters, 2 with binoculars, 1 on radio, professional setup, alert and careful. Mark settled his breathing, crosshairs on the first target, 5:47 a.m. He pulled the trigger. The rifle fired. First spotter dropped. Binoculars falling. The gas system cycled. That reassuring clack of metal on metal. Then nothing. The trigger did not release. Bolt was half open. Jammed. Mark's blood went cold. He was exposed. Scope glint visible in the early light. 2 spotters still alive. Still alert. Looking for the source of the shot that had just killed their companion. German rifle fire cracked across the distance. Bullets hitting the crater rim. 5 yards away, then closer. Germans adjusting their aim. Spotters calling for help. Panic tried to take over. Mark forced it down. The bolt was stuck. Piston seized. He had to clear the jam while under fire, or he was dead. He pulled the bolt back manually. Stuck solid. Hammered it with his palm. Still stuck. Used the rifle butt against the crater wall for leverage. The bolt jerked backward with a crack that sounded too loud. Spent casing jammed in the chamber. He extracted it with his knife tip. Precious seconds ticking away. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Bullets getting closer, 3 yards from his position. Germans had his range now, just a matter of time before one of them got lucky. Clear the chamber. Chamber a new round manually. Aim, fire. The rifle bucked. Second spotter went down. Worked the bolt by hand. Chamber another round. Aim, fire. Third spotter fell. Mark crawled backward immediately, fast and low, bullets following him. Hitting dirt 2 yards behind where he had been. 50 yards, 75, 100. He reached the wire and slipped through as German soldiers poured out of the church. Too late. Mark was gone. Back at his foxhole, he sat with shaking hands, complete despair washing over him. He disassembled the rifle with fingers that would not stay steady, found the problem immediately. The gas tube, made from copper wire salvaged from a radio antenna. The copper had cracked from heat, metal fatigue from sustained firing. Copper could not handle the temperature generated by rapid fire. Bobby died for nothing, Mark thought. The modification does not work. It is fundamentally flawed. I am going to die and take others with me when this rifle fails at the worst possible moment. He stared at the broken copper tube, the promise crumbling. 340 lives still needed saving, but the weapon was unreliable. Dangerous. Uncle Sal's voice from years ago. Wrong material, kid. The system failed because you used what was easy instead of what works. Copper is soft. You need steel. Mark looked at the broken tube, then at the destroyed German half-track that had provided the piston metal. Better steel. Stronger. Heat-resistant. March 16th, 2 a.m. He went back to the half-track wreckage, cut a new piece of steel, thicker, harder, filed it carefully, shaped it into a new gas tube. 3 hours of work, hands raw, fingers bleeding from sharp metal edges. Test the fit, test the seal, test the connection to the piston. Everything had to be exact. 5 a.m., he test-fired behind the supply tent again. Loaded 5 rounds, aimed, pulled the trigger. Boom, clack, boom, clack, boom, clack, boom, clack, boom. All 5 rounds, perfect cycling. Barrel hot, but the steel tube held. No cracking, no metal fatigue. Steel worked where copper had failed. The modification worked. Second generation. Better, stronger, built from failure and learning. Bobby, I learned. I failed once. Fixed it. That is what you taught me. Try, fail, learn, improve. That afternoon, Jack Murphy returned from a mission. 3 confirmed kills, church steeple spotters, same ones that had been calling artillery for days. Murphy found Mark cleaning his rifle. Used your method, worked perfect. Mark looked up, surprised. What? Gas port, piston, modified trigger. Tony told me about it. I built one last night, took out 3 spotters before they knew I was there. No displacement, no counterfire. Just 3 dead Germans and me walking back. You used copper tube? No, Tony said yours cracked. I used steel from the half-track. Worked perfect. No jamming. Mark realized the method was spreading. Not just the idea, actual implementation. Second-generation design. Better than his first attempt because Murphy had learned from Mark's mistake. How many others? Murphy shrugged. Tony built one. DeMarco asked questions last night. Maybe 4 or 5 total by now. By March 20th, 8 snipers in the division were using modified rifles. All second generation, steel tubes, refined trigger modifications, learning from each other's successes and failures. Our results were immediate and measurable. German reconnaissance in the 34th Division sector dropped 60%. Spotters were still probing, but moving slower, taking different routes, showing more caution. Something had changed, and they did not know what. March 24th. A captured German artillery observer was brought in for interrogation. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, 29 years old, forward observer for 3 months. Professional soldier who knew his job. The intelligence officer conducting the interrogation filed a report afterward. It included verbatim transcript. Why have your spotting teams reduced observation time? The American snipers have become more aggressive. How so? They fire multiple shots rapidly. Our spotters do not have time to relocate. We have lost 17 observers in 10 days. Multiple shots, the Americans use bolt-action rifles. I do not know how they do it, but they do. The shooting is too fast for bolt action, like machine gun fire. But we know it is individual snipers because we see only single muzzle flash. The report was filed, noted, not connected to Mark Romano or modified rifles, just documented as increased sniper effectiveness. Nobody in American command understood what was actually happening. German intelligence analyzed the reports. 17 observers lost in 10 days. Pattern clear, American snipers engaging multiple targets before observers could react. Their theory was wrong, but logical. Americans must have received new semi-automatic sniper rifles from factories. Maybe modified M1 Garands with scopes. Something official. Something authorized. They never discovered the truth. Never understood it was field modification by individual soldiers using hand tools and scrap metal. German doctrine changed in response. Spotters worked alone instead of in groups. Changed positions every 30 minutes instead of staying in place for hours. Avoided church steeples and obvious high points. Requested counter-sniper teams for all observation posts. The changes helped, but not enough. American snipers kept killing them. Artillery support dropped. German infantry became more cautious. Casualty rates among Americans continued falling. By April, the tactical balance at Anzio had shifted. Not dramatically enough to break the stalemate, but enough that American infantry could move during daylight without immediate artillery response. Enough that the casualty rate stayed below 30% instead of climbing higher. And still no official report mentioned modified rifles. The snipers kept their secret, communicated through whispers, shared tools and techniques quietly, taught each other what worked and what failed. But May 3rd, everything would change when an ordnance captain made a routine inspection and discovered what should not exist. May 3rd, 1944. Captain James Keller from the Ordnance Department arrived at Anzio for routine weapons inspection, moving from foxhole to foxhole, checking rifles for wear corrosion, unauthorized modifications that soldiers made in the field when they thought nobody was watching. He picked up a Springfield belonging to Corporal Tony DiNardo, examined the barrel in the morning light, saw something that should not be there, a tube wrapped along the length, wire and metal where only steel should exist. His expression changed. "What is this, Corporal?" Tony hesitated, knew what was coming. "Field modification, sir." "I can see that. Who authorized it?" "Nobody, sir." Keller disassembled the rifle in 30 seconds. Professional, efficient, hands that had inspected thousands of weapons and knew immediately when something was wrong. He saw the gas port drilled into the barrel, the piston mechanism, the modified trigger group. His face turned red, the color of anger mixed with disbelief. "This rifle has been illegally altered." "Who did this?" Tony said nothing, met the captain's eyes and stayed silent. "Corporal that asked you a question." Tony's voice was steady. "I did it, sir." "You drilled a hole in the barrel?" "Yes, sir." "You understand that is destruction of military property?" "Yes, sir." "Who taught you how to do this?" Tony held the stare. "Figured it out myself, sir." Keller did not believe him, could see the lie in Tony's face, but proving it would take time and effort. He inspected 6 more rifles that day, all modified, all using the same system, exact same gas port location 6 inches from the chamber. Same piston design, same trigger modification. This was not independent invention. This was systematic. Someone had taught this. Someone had started it and spread it through the unit like infection. Keller filed a report to Colonel Edward Mitchell that evening, Division Ordnance Officer, the man responsible for every weapon in 15,000 soldier hands. May 5th, Colonel Mitchell read Keller's report in his tent office. Read it twice. Then called for Sergeant Major Tom Briggs, 40-year career NCO, man who knew everything that happened in the division before officers heard about it. "Sergeant Major, these modified rifles, what do you know?" Briggs stood at attention, but his face showed nothing. "Heard about them, sir. Snipers been using them since March." "And you did not report it?" "Did not think it was my place, sir." Mitchell's voice went hard. "It is your place if soldiers are destroying government property." Briggs shifted his weight slightly, choosing words carefully. "Sir, the modifications work. Casualty rate down 11% since March. Spotters are not calling in fire like they used to. Our men are not dying as fast." Mitchell stared, processing what he was hearing. "Are you telling me these illegal modifications are effective?" "Yes, sir, very effective, statistically measurable." Mitchell ordered an investigation. He wanted names. Who started it? Who taught it? Who was responsible for turning an entire sniper platoon into criminals who had violated regulations and destroyed government property? The investigation took 3 days. Every sniper was interviewed. Every single one gave the same answer with minor variations. "I modified my own rifle, sir. Figured it out myself." Nobody mentioned Mark Romano. The code of silence held perfectly. Soldiers protecting each other the way they always did when officers asked questions about things that actually worked. But Mitchell was no fool. He had not survived 20 years in the Army by being stupid. 8 identical modifications did not happen independently. Someone invented this system. Someone taught it. Someone was the source. He examined maintenance logs going back to January. Found the earliest modification date, March 12, 1944. Rifle serial number 3215847. Assigned to Corporal Marcus Romano, Scout Sniper Platoon, 5th Army. May 7th, Mitchell called Mark to division headquarters. Made him stand at attention in front of a desk covered in paperwork and maps. Corporal Romano, you modified your rifle on March 12th. Yes, sir. Did you teach others how to do it? No, sir. They figured it out themselves. 8 identical modifications happened independently. Apparently, sir. Mitchell knew he was lying, could see it in Mark's face, in the way he held himself, in the careful choice of words that were technically true but fundamentally dishonest, but proving it was impossible. And the statistics did not lie. 11% casualty reduction. Lives saved. Numbers that could be measured and documented. Mitchell made a decision. I am ordering an engineering evaluation. If the modification is safe and effective, I will recommend official adoption. If it is unsafe, everyone involved faces court-martial. Understood. Yes, sir. Dismissed. May 8th. Mitchell called a meeting. Scout platoon assembled in a supply tent. 12 snipers standing with their rifles. Lieutenant William Cross attending. Looking uncomfortable, like he knew something bad was about to happen. Mitchell held up one of the modified rifles. This weapon has been altered in violation of Army regulations. Whoever is responsible for these modifications is subject to court-martial for destruction of military property. Silence. 12 faces showing nothing. Mitchell continued, voice measured. However, these modifications have proven tactically effective. The casualty rate at this beachhead has dropped 11% over the past 6 weeks. Artillery fire has decreased. Enemy spotters have been neutralized more efficiently than standard doctrine achieves. He set the rifle down carefully. I am ordering an engineering evaluation of these modifications. If the evaluation confirms they are safe and effective, I will recommend official adoption. Until then, any soldier caught modifying a weapon without authorization will face disciplinary action. Clear, yes, sir, came the chorus. Mitchell left. The snipers stood there uncertain whether they had just been threatened or praised. Both maybe. The Army way of dealing with problems that had no good solutions. Lieutenant Cross stayed behind. He walked slowly to the back of the tent where Mark stood. Face showing conflict. Duty versus reality. Regulations versus results. Romano. Sir. You started this. Not a question, a statement. Sir, do not lie to me. I am not an idiot. Cross's voice was quiet, controlled, not angry, something else, something that sounded like pain. You are the only sniper in this platoon with mechanical experience. You grew up fixing engines. You modified your rifle, and the others copied you. Mark said nothing, knew anything he said would be either a lie or an admission. Cross stepped closer, voice dropping to almost a whisper. I should court-martial you. By every regulation, I am supposed to bring you up on charges, but I will not. You know why? No, sir. Because you saved lives. Cross's voice cracked slightly, almost broke. Ritchie, Hooper, Garrett, Sullivan, all those men died because we could not kill spotters fast enough. You fixed that problem. Illegally, recklessly, against direct orders. But you fixed it. Mark stared, had not expected this, had expected anger, punishment. Not this. Cross looked away, stared at the tent wall like he could see through it to something in his past. My brother was Lieutenant Mark Cross, Marine Corps, died at Guadalcanal, November 1942. Following orders that I still think were probably correct. But watching him die from 10,000 miles away while I sat safe at a desk in Washington, it did something to me. He turned back to Mark, eyes showing old pain. I compensated by trusting doctrine more. By believing if we just followed the manual precisely enough, if we just obeyed every regulation exactly, nobody else would die. I made doctrine into gospel because questioning it meant admitting my brother died for bad reasons. Silence stretched between them. The sound of distant artillery. Men moving outside. The war continuing while this moment happened. But you saw the problem and you fixed it. You valued lives over regulations. I valued regulations hoping they would keep men alive. I was wrong. You were right, and I am sorry it took me this long to see it. Cross's voice softened. The engineering evaluation will take 6 weeks, maybe longer. If it comes back positive, you will probably be reassigned to a training unit to teach this technique. If it comes back negative, you will face court-martial. Until then, keep your head down. Do not modify any more rifles. Do not teach anyone else. And for God's sake, do not talk to any reporters if they come around. He walked toward the tent exit, stopped at the entrance, turned back. Romano, what you did took more courage than anything I have done in this war. More courage than following orders. More courage than enforcing regulations. You broke the rules because keeping men alive mattered more. I hope you understand what that means. Then he was gone. Mark stood alone, hands shaking, not from fear, from something he could not name. Relief maybe, or vindication, or just the exhaustion of carrying weight alone and suddenly having someone acknowledge it existed. Late May 1944, a team from Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland arrived at Anzio, collected 3 modified rifles, shipped them back to the United States for testing. Engineers who understood metallurgy and gas pressure and mechanical systems. June and July, the engineers fired 500 rounds through each rifle, measured everything: gas pressure at various points in the barrel, bolt velocity during cycling, barrel stress under sustained fire, trigger timing and release mechanisms, accuracy degradation over multiple shots. They disassembled the rifles completely, examined every component under microscopes, conducted metallurgical analysis of the drilled barrels, stress-tested the modified trigger groups, calculated failure probabilities and safety margins. They wrote a 47-page report, technical language, engineering specifications, data tables and charts. The conclusion was buried on page 43. The gas-operated modification increases rate of fire by approximately 300%, from 1 round per 4 seconds to 5 rounds per 2 seconds. This is achieved without compromising accuracy or safety under normal combat conditions. Barrel life is reduced by an estimated 15% due to increased thermal stress from rapid sustained firing. This is an acceptable trade-off given the tactical benefits demonstrated in field conditions. The trigger mechanism requires careful adjustment to prevent slam fires. We recommend controlled implementation with standardized manufacturing specifications and installation by trained armorers only. Conclusion: recommend official adoption with technical manual development. The report sat on desks in Washington for 6 weeks, reviewed by the Ordnance Department, the Infantry Board, the Chief of Staff's office. Debates occurred in conference rooms far from any battlefield. Some officers argued the modification violated the Springfield's design philosophy, set dangerous precedent, encouraged unauthorized field modifications, undermined the authority of the manual and the chain of command. Other officers pointed at casualty statistics. Lives saved, enemy response, tactical advantages that were measurable and documented. August 12, 1944, the War Department issued Technical Manual 9-1905A, official publication, printed and distributed. Title Field Modification of M1903, Springfield Rifle for Gas-Operated Semi-Automatic Function. The manual included detailed instructions, engineering diagrams drawn by professional illustrators, tolerances and specifications calculated to 3 decimal places, safety procedures, step-by-step installation guide, everything needed for trained armorers to perform the modification under controlled conditions. The publication credits section was on page 2. Mark read it later and felt something inside him go cold and hollow. Based on field observations and engineering analysis conducted by Ordnance Department personnel, 5th Army Italy Theater of Operations, March through May 1944. No mention of Mark Romano, no mention of Anzio, no mention of Bobby Sullivan or promises made to dying friends. No mention of corporals who built illegal weapons in supply tents at 2:30 in the morning because they could not watch one more friend die. Just field observations, engineering analysis, passive voice erasing everyone involved. September 1944. 200 rifles were converted using the official specifications. November, 800 rifles. Deployed to sniper units in Italy, France, and the Pacific. Standard equipment for scout sniper teams operating in high-casualty environments. Results between August 1944 and May 1945. Casualty rate among scout snipers dropped 14% compared to pre-modification rates. Conservative estimates credited the gas-operated Springfield with saving 340 American lives. Mark Romano's name appeared in no official records of innovation, no documentation, no medal, no commendation. His service records showed a reassignment in October 1944 to Infantry Training Center, Fort Benning, Georgia, teaching marksmanship and weapon maintenance. Nothing about why. For 6 months he taught classes, referred students to Technical Manual 9-1905A when they asked about rapid-fire techniques. Never mentioned he had invented it, never claimed credit, just did his job and counted days. December 15th, 1944, 10 o'clock in the morning. Mark received orders to report to the Judge Advocate General's office. He walked across the parade ground at Fort Benning, Springfield slung over his shoulder. Boots polished, uniform pressed, expecting the worst. Captain Richard Barnes sat behind a desk covered in paperwork, gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Corporal." Mark sat, hands on his knees, waiting. Barnes opened a file. Corporal Marcus Romano, service number 32158847. Scout Sniper, 5th Army, Anzio Beachhead. You modified a government rifle without authorization in March 1944. Yes, sir. You understand that is destruction of military property. Yes, sir. You drilled a hole in the barrel. You altered the trigger mechanism. You fabricated unauthorized components using scrap metal and salvaged materials. Yes, sir. Barnes closed the file, looked at Mark for a long moment. Why? Mark met his eyes. Men were dying, sir. German spotters were calling in artillery faster than we could kill them. Standard doctrine was not working. I thought I could fix it. And you did not ask permission. I knew what the answer would be, sir. So you violated regulations knowingly? Yes, sir. Barnes leaned back in his chair. The silence stretched. Somewhere outside, a drill sergeant was shouting at recruits. Life continuing. Your modification has been officially adopted. 800 rifles converted. 14% reduction in scout sniper casualties. Conservative estimates say 340 American lives saved between August and now. Pause. Barnes's face showed nothing. You should receive a medal. Mark said nothing. But you destroyed government property. You acted without authorization. You encouraged other soldiers to do the same. You violated the chain of command. You endangered men with untested equipment. Barnes picked up a document. The recommendation from Colonel Mitchell is court-martial, dishonorable discharge, 6 months confinement, loss of all benefits. Mark's hands tightened on the chair arms. He forced them to relax, said nothing, waited for the hammer to fall. Barnes set that document down, picked up another. However, the Chief of Staff's office has reviewed your case. They have decided that prosecution would create negative publicity. A soldier court-martialed for saving 340 lives does not play well in newspapers, especially when the Army has adopted his method and taken credit for it. Mark's jaw tightened, anger rising, pushed it down. Barnes pulled out a final document. You are being reassigned to Rear Echelon Logistics Unit, Supply Depot, Norfolk, Virginia. No combat duty, no training duty, no public recognition. You will spend the remainder of your enlistment processing supply requisitions in a warehouse, counting boxes, stamping forms. You will not speak to reporters. You will not discuss the modification. You will fade into obscurity and be grateful you are not in prison. Sir, consider yourself lucky, Corporal. Barnes's voice went hard. You violated regulations and you are walking away without a court-martial. That is more than most soldiers get. That is more than you deserve after the chain of command you broke. Mark's voice was quiet, controlled, every word measured. I did not do this for recognition, sir. Barnes stood. Then you will not miss it. Dismissed. Mark left the office, was reassigned to Supply Depot in Norfolk 3 days later. Spent the next 7 months stamping forms, counting inventory, processing requisitions for bullets and beans and all the mundane supplies that kept an army running. Never modified another rifle, never taught another class. The army buried him in paperwork and obscurity, and he accepted it, because Bobby had not asked him to get medals. Bobby had asked him to save 340 lives. Promise kept. Price paid. Done. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. War in Europe over. Guessed, Japan surrendered after atomic bombs fell. War completely over. Mark was discharged in August 1945. Rank Sergeant, Combat Infantryman Badge. 2 Purple Hearts for wounds received. Honorable Discharge Certificate. Train ticket home. No medals for the modification. No recognition beyond what fellow snipers gave him when they shook his hand and said thank you, which was all he wanted anyway. September 1945. Mark returned to Red Hook, Brooklyn. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Gowanus Canal still smelled like diesel and dead fish. Docks still ran cargo. Uncle Sal's garage still stood on the same corner. Uncle Sal offered him a rum. Mark took it. Same work, same engines, different person doing it. The war had changed him in ways that only showed in quiet moments when he thought nobody was watching. 1953. Mark was 29. Used his savings to buy a small garage. 2 bays, east side of Red Hook. He could not bring himself to paint and Sullivan after Romano on the sign. Bobby was dead. The partnership died with him in Italian mud. The sign read Romano Engine Repair. Below in smaller letters, in memory of Robert Sullivan, U.S. Army, a customer brought in a Ford with rough idle one afternoon, asked while Mark worked under the hood. You serve in the war? Mark did not look up, hands adjusting a carburetor. Italy. Did my job, came home. Do anything important? Long pause, wrench turning bolt, the sound of metal on metal. Kept some friends alive, lost others. That is war. The customer's voice changed. My brother died at Anzio, February 44. Artillery got him. Mark stopped working, looked at the customer. What was his name? Tommy Ritchie, private, from Philadelphia. Mark closed his eyes, saw Tommy's face, remembered sharing rations. I knew him. He was a good man. You were there when he died. I was there. Silence. The customer looking at Mark differently now, with something like gratitude mixed with sadness. Thank you for being there with him. Mark nodded, could not speak, went back to work. That night, he sat alone in the garage after closing, looked at the empty wall space where N. Sullivan should have been painted. Bobby, he whispered to darkness that gave no answers. I kept the promise. 340 went home. But you should have been one of them. You should be here fixing people while I fix cars. That was the deal we made. No answer. Never was. 1969, Mark's son was 20, college student, home for the weekend. Found Mark in the garage working on a carburetor. Dad, my professor says every veteran has a story. What did you actually do in the war? Mark did not look up. Fixed things that were broken, tried to keep people alive. But did you do anything that mattered, like medals or commendations or anything? Mark stopped working. Long silence. Finally looked at his son. Your Uncle Bobby died because I hesitated. When I stopped hesitating, I saved 340 men who went home to families like ours. The Army took credit. I took memories. That is how it works. Uncle Bobby, Mom's brother, my best friend, combat medic, saved my life. I could not save his. I am sorry. Mark went back to the carburetor. Me too, kid. Every day for 25 years. Me too. March 9th, 1991, 47th anniversary of Bobby's death. Mark was 67, working in the garage, customer's Chevy on the lift. 3:30 in the afternoon. He felt it. Chest tightness, left arm numb, strange sensation like pressure building inside. 3:47 p.m. Crushing pain, heart attack, massive. No warning beyond what he had ignored. He collapsed, clutching his chest, world graying at the edges, final thoughts forming as consciousness faded. Bobby, I kept the promise. 340 went home because you told me to fix it. I am sorry it took your death to give me courage. Romano and Sullivan Services. In my name and yours, always. He died at 3:51 p.m., exact minute Bobby had died 47 years earlier. Same day, same time. The symmetry was either cosmic or coincidence, and it did not matter which. The obituary in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle was 4 paragraphs. Marcus Romano, 67, of Red Hook, died March 9th. Veteran of World War II, 5th Army Italy campaign. Worked 38 years as engine mechanic. Operated Romano Engine Repair, 1953 through 1991. Survived by wife Dorothy of 43 years, 2 children, 4 grandchildren. No mention of rifles, no mention of gas ports, no mention of 340 lives. No mention of Bobby Sullivan or promises kept in the face of death and regulations. 1987, Dr. Thomas Weber published a paper, Field Innovation in European Theater, Unauthorized Modifications and Tactical Effectiveness. 3 paragraphs about the T-operated Springfield. Mentioned modification originated Anzio, March 1941. Credited unidentified scout sniper from 5th Army. No name, 1988. A researcher at the Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, discovered a maintenance log. Anzio, March 1944. Listed rifle serial 3215847. Non-regulation modification, gas-operated conversion status, unauthorized assigned to Corporal M. Romano Scout Sniper Platoon. Researcher cross-referenced the name. Found service records. Found discharge papers. Found death certificate dated March 9, 1991, 2004. Article published in Army History Journal. The Silence Wave Shot, How a Brooklyn Mechanic Changed Sniper Doctrine at Anzio. Published 13 years after Mark died. Nobody in his family saw it. Son had died in 1998. Daughter had moved to Arizona and did not follow military history. Grandchildren never knew. The gas-operated Springfield is a footnote now. Curiosity. But between August 1940 and May 1945, that modification saved 340 American lives. 340 men who went home to Brooklyn, in Kansas, in Tennessee, in Boston, in Memphis, in Philadelphia. Because a dock worker's son from Red Hook decided at 2:30 in the morning that following regulations mattered less than keeping friends alive. 2024. Marine Corps Base, Quantico, Virginia. A young armorer pulls a dusty manual from a shelf. Technical Manual 9-1905A. Published August 12, 1944. Obsolete now. Springfield phased out in 1957. But the principle remains. Page 2. Publication credits. Based on field observations and engineering analysis, 5th Army, Italy, March through May 1944. No names. Never any names. The armorer files it back. Between forgotten documents that nobody reads. Greenwood Cemetery, Brooklyn. A modest headstone weathered by 33 winters. Marcus Romano, 1924 to 1991. Sergeant U.S. Army, World War II. No mention of rifles. No mention of 340 lives. Army Heritage Center. Filing Cabinet 14J. Contains maintenance log from Anzio. Water stained. Attached note handwritten on yellowed paper. No signature. No date. This rifle saved my life. March 18, 1944. Church steeple. 3 spotters. All dead before they could call artillery. Whoever modified this weapon understood that keeping men alive matters more than following regulations. I never learned his name, but I owe him everything. 340 men went home. 340 families had fathers and sons and brothers. Because Bobby Sullivan told his best friend to fix it. Because Mark Romano kept that promise, even though keeping it meant risking execution and accepting erasure. The work matters. The credit does not. Bobby would have understood that. Mark knew it. And 340 families who never knew his name had lives because of it. That is the only legacy that matters. Not the medals never awarded, not the recognition never given, not the name erased from every official record. Just 340 men who lived long enough to go home, to marry, to have children, to grow old, to die in their beds instead of Italian mud. Because sometimes the greatest courage is breaking rules when keeping them gets people killed. Because sometimes the best innovations come from corporals with hand drills and scrap metal who cannot watch one more friend die. Because sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that nobody will ever know you did it. Mark Romano understood that, lived it, died with it, and 340 families never knew they owed their existence to a Brooklyn mechanic who learned in his uncle's garage that the system does not care what the manual says. The system cares what works. The rifle still teaches that lesson, even if the name of the man who proved it has been forgotten by everyone except the ghosts who remember.